Hello and welcome to Service Design Part 3. My name is Lowell Amos. I'm an ITIL expert, and for the next several minutes I'm going to talk to you about the service design phase of the ITIL lifecycle. This is the third in a three-part series that covers service design. In this lesson, we'll take a brief review of the Service Design Part 2 lesson that we talked about a few minutes ago. And then we'll jump in and cover some of the key processes of the service design phase that are important in order to develop that service design package that defines the areas of value for the business. These include service level management, availability management, capacity management, IT service continuity management, and then we'll review some terms. So let's get started. In Service Design Part 2, we introduced some basic processes and concepts that are required to develop a service design package. These included the information security management process as a process that ensures that the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of an organization's assets, information, data, and IT services are understood and designed for. We talked about the four perspectives of organizational, procedural, physical, and technical as being important dimensions to consider when designing the information security management requirements through the information security management process. We also introduced the concept of an information security management system as part of an overall knowledge management system that contains those standards, procedures, and guidelines that support the information security management process and policies. In Service Design Part 2, we also covered service catalog management. This is the process that provides a single consistent source of information on all live and operating services and makes sure that those business users and customers have access to it and understand what's available from the IT service provider. The service catalog comes in two flavors, the business service catalog and the technology service catalogs. The business service catalog is exposed to the business users and is what they see and understand how IT provides value to them, whereas the technical service catalog is really more about the technology that underpins the business services. The objective is to provide that single source of consistent information for communicating those available services and their details and dependencies to the organization. In Service Design Part 2, we also talked about the importance of the supplier management process. This ensures that value for money is obtained from our suppliers and third-party vendors, and it provides a basis for which we can evaluate whether those suppliers are performing against the targets contained within their contracts. The importance of the supplier contract management database as a single place that we can look for both contracts, suppliers, what products and services are offered by suppliers, and how they're performing over time against their contractual requirements. We also introduced the idea of a configuration item, which we'll talk a lot more about in service transition, but a configuration item is a component of an IT service. Service level management is one of the critical and key processes for you to understand at the foundations level. It is the process that negotiates, agrees, and documents the appropriate IT service targets with the business and then monitors those targets and produces reports on delivery against the agreed to services, and where necessary will take actions in the form of a service improvement program to improve results. The goal of service level management is to ensure that all operational services and their performance are measured consistently throughout the organization, and proactive measures can be taken to implement improvements where the level of service delivered does not meet the current or agreed to future needs of the business. The outputs of service level management are service level agreements and operational level agreements. The service level manager is often involved in negotiating underpinning contracts with suppliers. That linkage to supplier management is important to understand because in order to meet SLAs that are negotiated with the business, we oftentimes need suppliers to act and perform against contracts. If we get underpinning contracts out of alignment with the SLAs or OLAs that they support, we will often have breaches of performance for our business customers. Service level management is about engagement and agreeing with the business on exactly what it is we're going to provide. This is a critical process to define the areas of value that we can provide from a utility and warranty point of view. Service level agreements come in many forms. There can be different structures. A corporate level service level agreement may cover generic issues that apply to the entire organization. It's a one-size-fits-all service level agreement. A customer level SLA covers issues that are specific to a customer or customer set. So we could write an SLA for a group of customers or a department or a division, and that would be considered a customer level service level agreement. Likewise, we could write a service level agreement that covers issues containing to a specific service, such as email. Different service levels for different customers can be captured together in what's called a multi-level service level agreement, which is a mix and match approach to customer level and service level SLAs. It's very important that you understand the different structures of the service level management agreements. Here are some basic content that might be found within a service level agreement: a service level introduction, the service description, the responsibilities of both the customer and the IT service provider, the scope of the SLA. We may outline the customer support and contact points and escalation. We may have agreements around availability and reliability of the service and performance criteria, as well as security and how much the service costs. These are the things that we would agree to with the business customer to define the SLA and what determines good service. This is where we objectify that idea of value that exists in the customer's mind, so that we have objective measurable targets that we can report against. Service level management is critical in order to providing the baseline or yardstick by which we evaluate our service and the service performance. Here are the basic activities of service level management: developing standards and templates, the contacts and relationships with the business, documenting those service level requirements, and negotiating and developing the SLAs. It's important that we don't agree to things that we're not capable of producing. Service level management is what provides that judgment. If there is a business or service requirement that cannot be met by the IT service provider, it is important that we understand that and either develop that new capability or choose not to agree to the service level requirement. This ties service level management directly back to strategy. Once service level agreements are in place, we must monitor and measure the performance against the SLAs, and over time they will have to be reviewed and revised. We also produce reports as part of service level management so we can understand how our service is performing and report that to the business. We oftentimes will collate, measure, and improve customer satisfaction through not only objective measures defined in the service level management process, but also through survey. And it's very important that we conduct service reviews and implement improvement plans via the service improvement plan process. The SLAM, or Service Level Agreement Monitoring Chart, is a great tool to have a conversation with the business in a service review to determine whether or not the customer is happy and understands the targets by which we are measuring the service. We also need to provide a way to manage complaints and compliments from the business as they occur. Here's an example of a SLAM chart, or SLA monitoring chart. We can identify services and customer sets and put them in a matrix and determine against a particular KPI where we stand. In this example, we're talking about availability. We may have agreed availability targets to 90%. And in certain cases, we have met those requirements, and in others, we have not. The SLAM chart is a graphical view of how we are performing against the services for specific customers. This is the basis of the discussion when we do a service review. We can review with our customers where we're performing and where we're not, and what actions we plan to take to improve performance over time. One of the critical questions of service level management is how are we going to measure and monitor the performance of a specific services. We can have service level agreements around things like availability or security. We could have service level agreements for incident management and support. We have to understand what the critical success factors are for the business when we design those service level metrics and monitoring. We want to make sure that we measure the right things and that we report to the business the things that they're concerned with. Another critical process within the service design phase of the life cycle is availability management. Availability management is the process responsible for defining, analyzing, planning, measuring, and improving all aspects of the availability of an IT service or its components. The goal of availability management is to provide single management focus on availability to ensure cost-effective availability matches or exceeds the agreed-to needs of the business, both now and in the future. And this is the rub of availability management, is the word cost effectively. It is possible to over-deliver on availability and provide an availability level that the business just isn't willing to pay for. Likewise, if we miss availability requirements of the business, they won't be happy. One of the critical components of warranty is that services are available when needed. And it's the role of availability management to make sure that our services and components are available when required, but if we over-design, we are not being cost effective. And this is the balance of availability management. Availability management can be both proactive and reactive. Proactively is about developing and maintaining availability plans, developing the methods and techniques and calculations for assessing and reporting availability, and this is not particularly easy. We have to interface with IT service continuity management and other processes to help with risk assessment. What is the business impact if a service is unavailable? These are reasonable questions that are at issue with both availability management and IT service continuity management. We want to ensure the consistency in service design and components align to the business availability requirements. From a reactive point of view, we need to monitor availability, reliability, and maintainability. More on that in a minute. We need standard and event reporting of the service and component availability directly from service operations. We need to ensure maintenance is performed according to the risk tolerances and assess performance and data gathered by processes. It's important for us to understand how robust our infrastructure is. The availability management system contains all the measurements and data needed for the business on service levels. This data can come from many sources, including the incident data from service operations. Availability is determined by the following factors and their key components to understand. Reliability is a measure of how long a CI or service can perform its agreed-to function without failure. One of the critical metrics at a component level is mean time between system incident as a measure of reliability. How long can the CI or service function before it's expected to fail? Maintainability is how quickly can a CI or service be returned to normal working order after a failure has occurred. Serviceability is how effective can suppliers meet the terms of their contract. Performance, we have to make a decision at what point degraded performance becomes unavailability. This is oftentimes at odds and is not easy to define. During the service level management process, that is something to be considered. The last dimension is security. Is the service secure? And if it's not, does it define unavailability? These are the key factors that need to be understood. Another critical understanding is the idea of vital business functions. A vital business function is a part of a business process that is critical to the success of the business. For instance, the ability of an ATM machine to dispense cash is likely a vital business function. The ability of the ATM to print statements may not be as vital. If we understand the vital business functions of our customers' business processes, this will tie directly into being able to cost effectively manage availability of the various components of the service. The distinction between what's vital and what's not must be considered as part of the availability plan and ties back to those patterns of business activity in service strategy. Availability management is completed at two intersecting levels: the idea of component availability and service availability. Component availability is just that. It's can the component of the IT service deliver its agreed-to function when required. That's the definition of component availability. This is typically reasonably easy to measure with monitoring tools and event monitoring systems. Service availability, on the other hand, involves all the aspects of the service and is oftentimes thought of as the customer view of whether the service is available. Component availability is directly related to that, but we can envision architectures where components can fail and the service maintains availability. This is the idea of redundancy or resiliency of design. This must be considered from the point of view of the vital business functions that a service supports and the availability requirements agreed to during service level management. This ties directly into technical architecture and design from a component and service point of view. Here's a calculation that demonstrates availability of a service. There's agreed to service time minus downtime divided by the agreed to service time expressed as a percent. Is the service available at 50%, 75%, 90%, or 99.99%? This is the algebra that defines availability. The question is, what is the agreed to service time? That would be defined in service level management. And what is the downtime? Meaning, when do we define the service as unavailable? These questions are not always obvious, and it is worthwhile to take the time in availability management to define what availability means. Reliability. A measure of reliability is mean time between system incidents. How long can the service or configuration item function without disruption? For components, this is oftentimes reported as part of technical specification. Mean time between failure. This is known as uptime. This is how long the system or service or component is available, expressed as a percent. Maintainability is oftentimes reported as mean time to restore service or downtime. This can oftentimes be determined directly from the incident data. It's the total downtime in hours divided by the number of service disruptions. In general, mean time to restore service should trend down over time, and that would demonstrate improvement in both availability and likely customer satisfaction. Capacity management is another critical process within the service design phase. It is tied directly to demand management and service strategy. Remember, the goal of demand management was to understand and influence the demand for IT services. Capacity management is where we design the capacity required to meet the demand within a cost-justifiable way. And this is the challenge. Customers generally will not pay for idle capacity. However, we must meet the current and future agreed-to needs of the business, and the balance of capacity management is just that, cost to capacity need. The Capacity Management Information System is a virtual repository where capacity management data is stored. It's part of the overall Service Knowledge Management System, and we'll talk more about that in service transition. The overall objectives of capacity management are to develop and maintain the capacity plan, provide advice and guidance to the design, ensure performance meets and exceeds the targets, and assist with the assessment and resolution of performance and capacity-related incidents and problems. Manage and assess change impact to plan, service, and resources, and ensure proactive, cost-justifiable measures are taken to improve performance. Capacity management can be very challenging for organizations, both from a service portfolio management or budgeting point of view, as well as from a demand management point of view. And ever-changing business needs oftentimes change the capacity targets without warning and quickly. Capacity management happens at several different levels. From the bottom up, there's component capacity management. What is the capacity of a configuration item or a component of a service? What's the service capacity requirements? And what are the business capacity requirements? These are three layers that need to be well understood. The easiest to understand is the component capacity. The component capacity is something like how much storage is available on the network. How many transactions can a particular configuration item handle in a minute? These are component capacity questions. Service capacity management is how much capacity can a particular service handle. For instance, in the ATM example from the previous slide, how many transactions per minute, day, hour can an ATM handle before it fails? And then the business capacity management is even a wider aperture or view. What strategic assets within the business limit business capacity? This can be things like bank tellers, phone agents, or other resources or capabilities within the business that maybe have capacity constraints. As an example, I once read a white paper regarding a bank, and the bank had decided to enter a new line of business by offering improved savings account interest rates for those customers who were willing to go with an online-only bank. They had no brick-and-mortar facilities. The IT organization had designed services to allow people to open accounts online, deposit money, withdraw money, transfer money, and do all the things that a normal bank would do for a consumer. However, they did not have any brick-and-mortar locations where you could walk in and talk to a person. So everything had to be handled via telephone or over the internet. The bank was very successful, and they attracted several new customers. The result, however, was that it oftentimes took 2 to 3 months for customers to open accounts. And the question is, why? In a review of the capacity plan, the service capacity targets were met. The IT organization was delivering the service capacity as expected. The components were also functioning as desired. The challenge laid in the business layer. There weren't enough physical agents to be able to process the paperwork in compliance with regulation in order to meet the demand. This was a failure of business capacity management and should be understood because it can have real business impact. The capacity management activities is performance monitoring and demand management. There's a direct link, and hopefully it's obvious, between the service strategy phase of demand management and capacity management and service design. We also have to have an understanding of size applications. How do we model and tune those applications and services and meet the storage and component level capacity needs as designed? We also need a mechanism to report and develop those capacity plans for current and future business need. IT service continuity management is another critical process of service design, and again ties directly to the idea of warranty in the value equation. The goal of IT service continuity management is to support the overall business continuity management practices by ensuring the IT infrastructure and those services can be resumed within agreed to timeframes following an adverse event. The objective of IT service continuity management is to maintain the service continuity and recovery plans, complete that business impact analysis so that we have an understanding of the impact of a loss of service or part of a service within the IT service organization, conduct risk analysis and management, provide advice and guidance, ensure that the continuity and recovery mechanisms are in place, assess the change impact on IT service continuity management plans and procedures, and ensure that proactive cost justifiable measures are in place to improve recovery mechanisms for services. IT service continuity management also works with suppliers to make sure that they can meet their contract terms as required in the event of an adverse event or disaster. The business income analysis is a critical factor to IT service continuity management. The purpose of the business impact analysis is to quantify the impact to the business the loss of a service would have. There are several different mechanisms to do this that are not covered at the foundations level, but some dimensions that should be covered are lost income, damage to reputation, loss of goodwill, loss of competitive advantage, breach of law, risk to personal safety, loss of market share, political, corporate, or personal embarrassment, and the loss of operational capability. These dimensions must be considered in a business impact analysis to understand how much investment should be made in countermeasures in the event of an adverse outcome. Risk assessment is an important component of the business impact analysis. There are several factors that have to be considered. The degree of the damage or loss. How impactful is the loss? What are the chances that we'll realize the loss? What's the probability? The time frame within minimum levels of staffing, facilities, and services that should be restored. How long can we go before the loss of the service becomes critical? And how vulnerable are our strategic assets to risk? So if we define risk as the uncertainty in outcome or the probability of realizing that loss, we need to consider our strategic assets and how vulnerable we are to those risks. And those can change over time or based on location or other factors. For instance, if we live on the coast, we are much more vulnerable to the risk of a hurricane than if we live in the center of the country. These factors help us guide IT continuity strategies and plans and recovery options. We can look at recovery options. Can we live in a manual environment for a while until the IT service continuity plan recovers the service and we get back to business as usual? Do we need a gradual recovery? For instance, could we rebuild our services from tape backup? Do we need something perhaps a little bit more robust than gradual, but not immediate? Some sort of intermediate recovery approach? Or do we indeed need immediate recovery because the service is vital to the business functions and we cannot function without it? In general, as we move up from manual workarounds to immediate recovery, we require more investment in the continuity plan. The activities involved in IT service continuity management involve agreeing on the scope and policies, the business impact analysis that quantifies the impact of the business. Without that, it's very difficult to make any reasonable judgments. The risk analysis, the view of our strategic assets and our vulnerability to risks, the IT service continuity management strategy and how it integrates to the business continuity management strategy, and the development of the IT service continuity management plans, the testing of those plans, the education and awareness of the employees, and in many cases, suppliers, and what's the plan, operation, and maintenance approach. So let's review some terminology. We talked about the capacity plan, providing details of the current and future utilization and performance requirements of a service. We talked about mean time between failure, mean time between service or system incidents, mean time to restore service. These are all components or calculations we covered within the availability management process. We discussed the idea of vital business functions and the importance of understanding what business functions are vital to the organization's success and which ones are less vital. We talked about high availability or resiliency of design to minimizing the impacts of component level failures. The idea of continuous operations is to drive availability to near 100%. And continuous availability is that theoretical 100% service availability. One note on continuous availability. While the goal is to achieve 100% service availability, that is a theoretical maximum that can never be obtained in practicality. If you look at the calculation for availability, it is impossible to have zero downtime. If that is not clear or not well understood, go back and review the formula and imagine an architecture that has a finite number of components, and you should be able to prove to yourself that 100% availability, while we can get very close, is a theoretical maximum that can never be achieved. We covered a lot in this lesson, and I hope you learned some things. In the beginning, we talked about Service Design Part 2 and reviewed some of the basic concepts we covered in a previous lesson. We then jumped in and talked about one of the critical focal points for the Foundations course, which is service level management. We talked about service level agreements at the corporate, service, and customer level. And we talked about the importance of the service level management process in order to document, define, agree, monitor, and report service levels to our customers. We then spoke about availability management and the importance of that as it relates to the value proposition of warranty. Likewise, we talked about capacity management and the idea of having to design capacity solutions at both a component, service, and business layer. Lastly, we talked about IT service continuity management and the importance of the business impact analysis and risk assessment that must be done in order to provide continuity to the organization. And then we reviewed some basic terms. With this lesson, we've wrapped up the service design phase of the ITIL lifecycle. I hope you've learned something and can see how, from service strategy to service design, we've been able to link this idea of conceptual value to something that's much more objective and measurable in the service design phase. Hopefully, by this point, you'll understand that the principal output of the service design phase of the life cycle is that architectural blueprint of the service or service design package. That's what defines all the dimensions or design aspects that we covered in Unit 1 and defines how we are going to deliver those to business customers. In future lessons, we're going to cover how we transition from a service design package into live operations. Thank you for your time. I hope you learned something, and I look forward to talking to you again in future lessons.